Welcome to All Things Chiropractic.
Well, welcome to another episode of All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
And I am Dr. Mark Davini.
Today, we're going to talk about associating with the right people.
Is that even possible?
Clearly, someone's making judgments of my life choices with you right now, but just kidding. All right. So what are we really talking about? We're talking about associateships in practice, and both from the employer and the employee point of view. So thinking about that, Dr. Davini, and would you say that an associate in today's world, is it a luxury? Is it a necessity? Is it a good or bad business decision? Just right off the bat.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for listening.
That's a wrap. The answer is yes. It's all of that and then some. When we talk about associates, it can be someone that you're actually hoping to bring into your practice and help you build your practice, expand your practice, and in doing so, help more people and grow your financial stability and reliability. So there's that. But there's also associates that can actually be a luxury. You hire them to make your life better. Sometimes the two do not overlap. You may just want someone to give you more time, someone to be able to free you up. So it's important to recognize the difference between the two. And for you to do that, it comes out to be managing your expectations.
Now, I can say that with all of our member offices, we have quite a few that have associates in them, and they can be certainly very successful in doing that. But it is an investment. It's an investment in time, obviously money. And that investment, I think, starts with the clinical investment from the employer doctor who presumably has been in practice for a while and can impart a lot of great clinical information that I think leads into the business success. Clearly, if they're looking for an associate, they're doing and have done pretty well to be able to do that, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, it means that they're probably seeing enough people in their practice that they say, look, I can see more if I had help. So it always comes down to, if we're going to say, what's the major flaw in this process? And you might hear this as a ongoing theme through virtually everything we ever talk about, and that's communication. You have to be able to communicate both as the employer and the employee what the expectations are. What is it that you are expecting or wanting out of this relationship? So yes, there are those doctors that come in and they're very green. They're very young, and they come out of school and they don't know anything. They don't know how to treat a patient. They don't know how to manage a patient. They don't know what's the best technique or what's the best approach. And there's a lot of clinical things they don't know.
Or better yet, the more challenging one is they think they know.
Yeah, we're going to go there. So, they think they know everything there is to know about that. And, sometimes these young docs come out of school and they're really sharp and they do know a lot of clinical information. But what the seasoned practitioner knows, and I'm very seasoned, but the seasoned, go ahead, say,
really, really
seasoned. Yeah. What the seasoned practitioner knows is that managing patients and being a good adjuster and having clinical skills is certainly one side of that coin. But the other side is the business end of it, the practice business end of things, and not just treating people, but treating them and managing them. And all of that has to overlap. And so when you bring in these associates, you have to bring them in with the understanding on both parts what it is you're bringing them in to do.
So, a friend, mentor of mine who's had a lot of associates over the years. So
he's seasoned also?
Yes, he certainly is.
We're going to use the word seasoned from now on.
Yeah, he is. Okay? I'm not going to.
Because I'm sharp and spicy.
Okay. Anyway, so he used to say there's 3 phases of associates in general. First phase is, they're green. They're just so happy to have a job. They're, coming in, wanting to learn everything and and really just, help ramp up their career. And then the second phase is now they got a little bit of a swagger. They've got some confidence. Things are connecting. They're starting to really rev up. And then the third phase is, and not all the time, but often, they think that you couldn't do this without them, that they are a linchpin. And boy, if they left, this office would just crash and burn. And I think that third phase sometimes happens because they've been sheltered with all of the other parts of the business, the stresses of business, the making payroll, the insurance reimbursement issues, the HR issues,
staffing.
Yeah, all of the stuff that the owner and or managers are burdened with that perhaps the associate has no clue about. And so that's where you get that teenage rebellion, because they just think they know it all, and they don't. But they don't know what they don't know, as what Parker used to say, right?
Right. The unconscious incompetent.
Are you describing me right now? How dare you?
I was staring right at you when I said it. But
Unbelievable. So, in looking at associates, I think, there's a lot of treasures inside different types of associates, depending on what you're looking for, right, Doc, as the employer, what your expectations are, as Dr. Davini said, and having that open channel of communication to be able to get that feedback, right?
Yeah, we're going back to communication. So when you sit down and you're trying to hire somebody, first thing you need to know is what you want out of that relationship. So am I actually looking for someone to make my life better, or am I looking for someone to make my business grow, or am I looking for someone to do both? Because truthfully, they're not all the same people. There are those people that will come in and they have all of the motivation to make your practice better. They're few and far between, because let's face it, they'd probably be out there doing it on their own anyway.
Or maybe they will be, and they just need a stepping stone. And sometimes it's like, that's okay too, right? You could ride that horse till it decides to go on its own, and you've been able to reap some of those rewards along the way.
That's true. So you have these people, and if you know that up front, that your expectation is you're looking for a long-term relationship. You're not just dating anymore.
He's staring into my eyes, everybody.
You're looking at a long-term relationship. And because of that long-term relationship mindset, you might not be interested in doing the intern mentality, bringing someone in, showing them the ropes, giving them the benefit of your seasoned knowledge, and then letting them go. So it comes out to, number one, first, you knowing what you want from an associate, so that when you start looking for the one that you're expecting, the one that you want to do what it is that you want them to do. And then, of course, the flip of that is the associate. What's their expectation? There are those associates that do just want to come in, they want to learn the ropes, and then they do want to move on to their own practice, or at least that's what they think.
Well, we do recognize that the environment of hiring associate today is a lot different than when Dr. Davini was in practice, and horse feed was part of the compensation package because that was the transportation needs back then.
We used to just barter for food.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But, in today's world, there's a lot more, or let's say different challenges, a lot more financial pressures of a newer graduate. We're really talking about a newer graduate who probably has hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. And if they're not moving back to a place where they can live, with family or friends or something like that, there's going to be a lot of needs of that person coming in the door, right?
Yeah, well, time has created a whole new category of associate. I will say they probably existed in the past, but they were so few and far between. But this whole new grouping that has become more common are those doctors who really want to find an associateship that's a good job, has decent hours, they're not responsible for the business development at all, they have a decent pay, they'll stay there forever. They're looking for a good job. They're looking to have stability. So that's a whole different category of person. which is a good category, actually, in the
Yeah.
world of chiropractic businesses. If you can find those people who really are interested in just working for you forever. And that would mean you'd have long-term stability. You'd have that ability to see more people, but also they would be happy. You would be happy. The patients would be happy. It would be a nice, fun environment. Everything would work that way instead of this pressure of, okay, you're here now. How come you didn't get any new patients this month? And I got all the new patients this month. And oh my God, if you don't see these people, you're not going to get paid. And so they start feeling the pressure and the whole thing turns into something different. So today with this immediate need that students are coming out of school with. They have this immediate need. And that immediate need is I need a paycheck and I need a paycheck yesterday. So it's created this category that actually is working out well in a lot of practices.
Well, as long as the expectations are realistic, right? Because there's certainly a lot to be said for those worker bees or those, not everyone can be a general, right?
Right.
But when you have that, if you, as an employer, start to complain, well, they didn't want to stay late to see that new patient, or, it's 6:01, they're out the door. And that may be true, but keep in mind that that's part of the package that you have taken on, is that person is not really treating it like their practice. They're treating it like they're an employee working a job in your practice.
Right. And you want that employee to love their job. You want them to be motivated and purposeful in their work. But to them, it is a job. We had one doc was telling me once they were looking for an associate, and this doc was looking for someone to help him expand the business. And the associate was sitting there saying, look, I want a job. I want to start out at $80,000 to $90,000 a year. I don't want to work past 6, and I don't want to work Fridays or Saturdays. And the doc looked at him and said, well, neither do I. That's why I'm hiring you.
Right.
Okay.
Can you give me a job?
But this was a doc that actually was trying to hire somebody as a luxury to improve their status, their lifestyle, their well-being in a sense. Yet they thought they wanted someone to help them build the practice. So you really have to be on board with what you're looking for so that when you start sitting with this doc. So if I was looking for that worker bee type of doc, and that doc said that to me, I would have been excited because now I found what I was looking for. But if I was looking for a type of doc that an associate where you're going to help me grow the practice and you're going to be as responsible for building that practice as I am, then that would not have been my person. So it's important to understand that there are those out there that will help you build and grow the practice. Today, they're few and farther apart than they were in the past, because chances are if they have that kind of motivation, that they're probably going to go out on their own. But if you find this other type that's becoming more and more common, where they really just want to work, they don't want to do the business, they don't want the stress of understanding, they're not responsible for bringing in new patients other than just regular normal protocol types of things, then you might find your associate that way.
Well, and one of the things that when we get these questions through our membership and they're asking about associates, one of the things we try to let them know is don't paint yourself in a corner when it comes to that compensation package. Yes, their needs are immediate, as Dr. Davini said, but if you top out on the compensation for the most part right away, there's no place to go, right? And then you start resenting that associate for making a lot more money than you are in your own practice.
I was just going to say the associate shouldn't make more money than you. And in the older days, again, base pays were less common because they wanted you to come into their practice and take the responsibility of finding new patients and building the volume in the practice so that you can be paid. So you get paid on a percentage of what you saw, which is no different than the owner of the business. If the owner of the practice doesn't see anybody, they don't get paid. But today, because of the immediate need thing, and recognizing that they might have student debt, they still have to live, they still have to eat food and maybe drive a car to get to where they're going. All of these things, you might offer them a base pay. But what happens is if you're looking for someone to help you grow the practice and all you ever do is help maintain that base pay and they don't grow the practice, they're pretty much telling you they want to be the other type of associate. That associate who just gets a good pay and shows up for work every day, is reliable and does a good job, helps people, but they really don't want that business responsibility.
The other thing to do that we recommend is docs, you lean into your associates because they are an investment with, your clinical experience, as we said. Like, not having staff meetings with your staff in general is always difficult. You should have those check-ins every week or two. But with your associate, I think it's really important to impart your clinical and your practice and patient management skills onto them because, let's face it, if you've been in practice a while, you've got a lot to impart, and it'd be great to be able to do that, especially with the newer docs who, they get the basics, right? Like any school, you get the basics. And in today's world, I think the students come out maybe with a false impression of what it's going to be like out in practice. You know what I mean?
Just the fact that you understand Medicare makes you invaluable.
Yeah, right.
You do understand Medicare, right? Yeah.
Some do. We get a lot of those emails and a lot of those questions, but yeah. So, it's like anything, the return on the investment depends a lot on you, doc, and also on your CAs too, right? Because, CAs will direct the patients to the doctor they prefer, right? If that's even something that will happen, or the new patients might go to one doctor over the other. And if you're not keeping an eye on your statistics to see, well, those new patients are not converting into, patients that come back in, they seem to disappear. What's going on?
Yeah. Or if you're not training them properly so that there is a congruency between what you do and what they do, so patients don't have to choose which one will treat them on any one given day.
And then there's always as the doctors season some more, right?
Seasoned is our new term.
There's the legacy, right? Do you have expectations that this associate or associates will purchase your practice? And again, if we're talking about those worker bees or those infantry that just go out there and work, they probably may not have any desire to want to go into business and purchase a practice. It all depends, right?
And that's very common because they were comfortable with the good pay. They were comfortable putting out a volume that made the business grow and made the business profitable as well as themselves, but they don't want the responsibility of a business. That's not for everybody. And those of us that have had business and have businesses, we know that's not for everybody. You never get a break from owning a business. And some people just want to have a good job and help people. That's fine. But if you think this person's going to be the one that's going to buy the practice, that's something that you may have a false expectation of.
But in today's world with corporate purchases, that's okay too, because what's very attractive in today's market for the few corporations that do purchase practices is they want the associate practice. They don't, if it's a one doctor and you're like, I want to sell this place and leave in 3 months or less, it's going to be a lot harder to sell that practice than you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 associates, so that when you do transition out, the place can still run pretty smoothly.
Right. And I'm a firm believer now that is the model we want. We want the model that has employee associates so that they're cranking out the work. They're getting paid a good fee, so they'll say, no matter who owns the business. And we talk about this in one of our other podcasts when it's how to prepare your practice for sale. The whole idea here is that it needs to be transferable. And if you have these associates who are very happy and content to put out their work, get people well, build a reputation of the practice, take home their pay, and they'll do that for anyone that owns the business. That's the practice that has value today. But if you have that practice where the two of you are your own unique personalities and your own unique techniques, and all of a sudden you go to sell it, and now the associate doesn't want to work for the new owner, and they leave, you really don't have anything to sell anymore because you're not going to be there and they're not going to be there. What you basically have is a patient list.
So I'm going to call this portion of the podcast Membership Moments. And this is about questions we get a lot from our member offices. And this leads into making sure that you allow enough ramp up time for your associate so that you're not committing, what's the word I'm going to say? The five-letter
F word.
Yeah, right? For the most part, it's not okay to take your NPI doctor and put it on a claim for your associate. There needs to be ramp up time for credentialing because some carriers are pretty quick. Other ones take forever.
Ever.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to make sure that you build into any employment offer, and as you go along, that ramp up time to get them credentialed and effective with the carriers that you're in network with. Because gone are the days of just throwing your NPI number on that claim and just hoping for the best. And, hey, well, I get paid, so it's really not a problem. Because the response we usually get is, well, the insurance paid me. Mm-hmm. Because we're in a prospective payment system for the most part, meaning we don't have to send in notes or get authorization. We can just send in the claim, and if there's benefits, it pays. The insurance company is relying on the truth on that claim form that is submitted under pains and penalty of perjury. So you want to make sure that you have that ramp up time. And as our members will get back from us, no, it's not okay to Q6 modifier or put your NPI number on there and send it in because they're not a coverage doctor. This is an associate you're hiring.
It's such a common thing, and you're right. It's, I'm going to have this doctor come in, and until we get them credentialed, they'll just bill it under my NPI number. But thank you for playing. And you just can't do things like that anymore. Computers have made things so out there. I'll give you an example. We have one doc who actually had to have a surgery. So they had a coverage doctor come in and just treat under the owner doc's NPI. And they were billing a certain carrier who happened to be the same carrier that was the owner doc's health insurance. So now this doc is in the hospital getting a surgery while that same carrier is receiving bills under their NPI number. And the two computers, whatever which way, AI, which is another one of our podcasts, talk to each other. And they discovered the 5-letter F word.
So, wow. Didn't take any human intervention there for the carrier to recognize this doctor is actually not treating these patients, yet here are the claims coming in.
So everything is different today. Like we said, there was a transition from what an associate was in the past to what they are today, which I actually believe is a good thing. It allows us to expand our practices and keep everybody happy for a very long time. Build value in the practice so that if there was that time you wanted to sell, if it ever came to be, you have something to sell. Where otherwise, everything just sort of transitions and fades away.
So as we wind down today's episode, here's another question for you, Dr. Davini. If I'm planning to sell to my associate, should I hold the paper on the practice?
I believe, in my opinion, that one of the last things you should do is play bank.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to get out of practice. Why are you going to become the silent partner to the practice? And that's what you are, right? If they're not successful, you don't get paid. If the business fails, you don't get paid. There's nothing to take back. They generally would have destroyed the practice at that point. You've become a silent partner in a business instead of getting away from that business, which in my mind would be the reason why you'd want to sell.
Yeah.
I would think.
I mean, if you're going down that road and you want to help that patient, that doctor, what about associateship to own, like rent to own, where maybe they build some equity into the practice as you go along?
There are formulas that can make that work. And it has to be until such a time that the practice is actually in the process of being transferred. It has to be structured in a way that's very one-sided to the owner of the practice. So that as time goes along, the associate may be building some equity in various ways, maybe building some equity toward the purchase of the practice. But if they bail on you, they have nothing. So at least the owner doctor has some advantages there. And like I say, there are formulas, but it's very tricky because, again, in my mind, I'm trying to sell my practice to not be in the chiropractic business anymore. And if I'm financing this business, I've become the silent partner in the same chiropractic practice, only now I have no control over it. So maybe it's that control freak in me. What do you think, Paul?
No comment there.
Okay.
So any closing thoughts or wisdom you'd like to depart on our listeners?
Oh, I guess when we look at it and think about it, we could say, more is not always better and less is not always good. You need to know what you're going for, manage those expectations, go for what you want, and don't settle for anything less.
Well, there it is. Words of wisdom from our seasoned doctor.
Yes.
Well, thank you again for listening to another episode of All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
And I'm Dr. Mark Davini. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to All Things Chiropractic. We'd love to hear from you. Visit allthingschiropractic.com with comments, episode ideas, or questions. Or connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at All Things Chiropractic Podcast. Be sure to join Dr. Mark Davini and Paul Andrews next time for another episode of All Things Chiropractic.